The NFL head coaching carousel has gotten even crazier this week. We're going to recap the NFL, where it's at, who still has a job, and a top prospect has now pulled out of the NFL draft. We're going to talk about that up next here on No Buts About It. What's up, everyone? I'm Josh Butts. This is No Buts About It. We got Stan the Jet fan here with us today. And Stan, speaking of the New York Jets, I just want to get right on into this because this is some breaking news. A guy who, I'd been hard on, a guy who I said maybe he should pull out of the NFL draft. It could be wise of him, and he ended up doing it, but he was likely going to be your first round pick. Dante Moore will now be not putting his name into the draft, according to reports. So, Stan, I wanted to get your thoughts since he was likely going to be your potential quarterback of the future. What do you think of this move? Do you think Dante Moore should have gone into the draft? Did you want him to be your future quarterback? What say you?
I mean, there's two perspectives to it. The first thing is for Dante Moore. I think the better decision by him would have been to go for the draft, especially in such a underdeveloped, undergrown QB class where almost all these QBs look like they need that year to sit. I think Dante Moore's inefficiencies and deficiencies, given that context, make more sense. However, next year, it looks like we're going to have a much more stacked QB class. And to a certain extent, next year's class seems better. And half the time it isn't. But with how poor this QB class is looking, I just thought he had a really good opportunity to guarantee himself a top five. I mean, I really didn't see him slipping out of the top five. I think there's multiple teams that if he was available at 4 or 5, they would have just traded up and gotten him there. I think the Rams, even they have a top 10, or they have one of the earlier picks, maybe not top 10, but somewhere there from a trade. The Rams are a team that we've seen them develop QBs, at least pick QBs and keep them on the bench and see if they could do their thing. They're going to need a new QB soon. They're looking at going to the Super Bowl. They want a QB who can keep this dynasty going. He could have gotten drafted by them and got in the top 15, right? So there's just I thought he was in a position where he had so many options to get that top 10, top 15 pick that by sitting out from it, I just don't see him getting picked this high next year. I think talking about his deficiencies, you just see in the biggest moments, he tends to kind of wither away. And when we saw that against Indiana twice, we saw it against other teams throughout the season. He just hasn't looked good when the competition is good. And, the NFL, there's a lot of good players in the NFL. There's a lot of great defenses in the NFL. That's you're going to a level so much higher than college. I just think that with another year of playing top teams, he's in the Big Ten. I just can't see him leaving next year as a top 10 pick type of candidate. I think it was a big mistake on his part. As a Jets fan, I am happy. As I've said, I did not think he would be a great pick. I think the Dante Moore prospect as a second rounder or late first round for a team like the Sean McVay Rams, who have that flexibility and can kind of stow him away. I think Dante Moore is a good candidate for that sort of system. For the Jets to take him at 2, I think that would just put too much pressure on him way too soon. And talking about pressure, I don't think the Jets, since Aaron Glenn, he's going to be our coach next year. That looks almost definite. If he's our coach going into next year after the season he's going to be on the hot seat. So even if we hear, okay, Dante Moore, we're going to draft him and sit him on the bench, the entire season, kind of like what the Giants did. What happened? Eventually, they saw the Giants coaches. They saw, hey, we need to have jobs next year. That's kind of a priority for me. Let me go and put this kid out there. And I think that's what would have happened with Dante Moore. So now I like that we're not going to look at that sort of prospect. So I think for the Jets, it's a better decision for Dante Moore. I think he made a mistake.
Yeah, so Dante Moore, he is insanely young. He's not even going to be 21 by the end of this upcoming draft. He's still going to be 20 years old. I think his birthday is in May, though, so he would have been 21 very soon after the draft. But the last game that we saw of him, that left a bad taste in some people's mouths. He did not look good. He looked like a young, raw prospect. I mean, look at what we saw. We saw a bunch of turnovers. We saw a guy who wasn't comfortable in the pocket. We saw a guy who made bad decisions when the spotlight shined the hardest. Now, again, young guy, hasn't really gotten a chance to start a ton. He was a starter, and then he sat behind Dylan Gabriel, and then he was a starter this year. But when I look at Dante Moore, I don't see an NFL ready quarterback. And you mentioned it. This draft is not great for quarterbacks. Fernando Mendoza is going to be the first overall pick, and then maybe like Ty Simpson. I'm not high on Ty Simpson, but maybe Ty Simpson sneaks into the first round. After that, there's really not a lot there. And I think if you look at what the NFL has been doing with young quarterbacks, they are on a shorter leash. NFL quarterbacks have less of a chance to develop than they did before. Part of that's because of the CBAs. Part of that's because it's easier to release them. Part of that because pressures are higher. And then you add on to all of that, the New York media. I think doing that to Dante Moore would just be setting him up for failure. I don't think he would be given a good enough opportunity. And that isn't to say it's because of the Jets. I think the Giants would have the same problem, or really any big market team. There would be a ton of pressure on this young man. He wouldn't get a chance to develop. And we already are looking at him and saying, he's not really an NFL quarterback. Okay, now put him in the NFL. It's going to be even worse. It's going to be so much worse. I would much rather see us be able to look at him in the Big Ten and go, this is a really good quarterback. He's got a shot. But we're already saying before he's drafted that he's probably not ready. He's definitely not going to be ready then if you move it to the NFL level. Now, flip side of that, Dante Moore, it's really hard. And I would have hated to have made this decision. I would have stressed over it so much. If you're a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, you pretty much have to go. Because, like you said, anything can happen. We've talked about it with Drew Aller. He was a top 5 pick. He went back for another year to chase a championship, gets hurt, not going to be a top 5 pick anymore. Very likely. Crazy things have happened in the draft, but very likely. Something could happen next year. Dante Moore he gets hurt, God forbid, but that could happen. Isn't a top 5 pick anymore. He loses on a lot of money. But I do think in the long run, this was the better decision for Dante Moore, even if it means he doesn't end up with the New York Jets, even if it means, taking a further draft pick, because maybe, yes, sure, his rookie contract is smaller. He gets taken 20th overall instead of 2nd overall or something like that. But he's more developed and he's able to actually play. He becomes respected, and maybe he's able to actually get a second contract. And that ends up getting him more money in the long run, especially with how lucrative these NFL contracts have become lately.
Yeah, one thing I do want to point out real quick, because I realized that when I said it was a bad decision for Moore, I was talking primarily financially, because he's probably going to lose about 35 million, or maybe not that high, but 25 to 30 million, depending on where he goes next year. Because I really just don't see him as a first round prospect. I didn't want the Jets to take him anywhere in the first round this year. I think there were other guys who I'd have been happier getting in the end half or the end third of that first round. But yeah, in terms of the playing career, the career he's going to have, if he's going into second or third next year, it seems a lot more likely that a team like the 49ers or the Rams, one of ththose teams that likes to take a quarterback, groom them on the bench, then throw them out there, those teams now have more of that chance to get him.
Yeah, I wonder what his NIL deal looks like. There is a chance now with how crazy NIL has gotten, and he will be one of the bigger names in college football next year. He could end up making money on this deal. I know Ty Simpson was getting some crazy offers to come back to college, and he doesn't know what he's going to do, or he's declared, but there was talks of him maybe undeclaring or something. But we'll see what happens with all that. But yeah, Dante Moore no longer entering the NFL draft. One big quarterback name has pulled out. Um, let's go over the coaching carousel. I wanted to just do a quick recap of who still has jobs in the NFL because it's been a lot this week. And I do want to say these are guys, some of them won't be on these teams next season. But right now, these are the teams they're associated with. They have jobs. These are updated as of this morning. Let's start with the AFC North. So, Cleveland Browns do not have a head coach. They currently do have their offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, and then defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz is being looked at for head coaching roles as well. So he could either take on the Browns head coaching role or move on as a head coach somewhere else. So that's something to keep an eye on. Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin resigned yesterday, which was a crazy story. Made a video about that, reacting to that. Offensive coordinator Arthur Smith is being looked at for head coaching roles. He's a former head coach of the Falcons. He's supposedly the Titans are looking at him as a head coach, which he was the offensive coordinator there for a few seasons. And then defensive coordinator Terrell Austin. It is expected. I'm seeing some reports on Twitter that neither of these guys are going to be back with the Steelers either way. So those are two names to keep an eye on. They will not be associated with the Steelers next year. Very likely. They could always be back, but it's unlikely. The Bengals, the only team that didn't fire anyone. Woo! Zach Taylor, longest tenured head coach in the AFC North now. Dan Pitcher is being looked at for head coaching spot. Specifically, I know he did interview with the Cleveland Browns, and then defensive coordinator Al Golden, of course. Baltimore Ravens head coach John Harbaugh has been fired. He's interviewing with the Giants today. It's his first interview, and the Giants are the only team that has fulfilled the Rooney Rule, and so are the only team that can hire a coach right now. So it'd be kind of interesting to see if John Harbaugh does not leave the building today in New York. Offensive coordinator Todd Monken is still there, and he's being looked at for some other roles. And then defensive coordinator Zach Orr is still there. Stan, is there anyone here who sticks out to you that you want to keep an eye on specifically?
I think Jim Schwartz is probably the number one DC candidate for any team looking for a DC, and there's going to be quite a few of them as the rest of these teams shuffle through their staffs, and there's already a few openings already. Jim Schwartz is a proven guy. I didn't know he was getting head coach looks. I don't see him as a head coach. I think he's probably better as like a very good DC with a lot of control over his system. I think that's where he works best. He's known mainly for his work with D-lines. And yeah, in the modern NFL, we're seeing edges becoming kind of the stars of defenses. Edges, defensive tackles, those D-lines are really where defense is won or lost. And with Jim Schwartz being a guy who's been around the NFL, he's had lots of success on defense. He's been in some of the big moments, not as many as you would have liked, but he has so much experience he brings to the table. I think he very well could be the highest paid DC entering next season.
Yeah, I think it's between him and probably like Brian Flores and Vance Joseph, both of whom are receiving head coaching interviews as well. And Jim Schwartz, he does have that head coaching experience. That is something to remember. He was the head coach of the Lions for a few years, got them turned around after that 0-16 season. But yeah, we'll see what happens with him. I could see the Browns just promoting him into, that role. We'll see what happens though. AFC West. Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott is back. Offensive coordinator Joe Brady is receiving head coaching interviews. DC Bobby Babich is back. New England Patriots, Vrabel, McDaniels, and Williams are all coming back. They're all still in the playoffs of that divisional round. We'll talk about them here in a little bit. The Miami Dolphins fired head coach Mike McDaniel. A little bit of a shocking move, at least to me, maybe not so much to Stan. Offensive coordinator Frank Smith is coming back as of now, and defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver is coming back. However, he has also received a few interviews. He's not a huge name out there right now, but he's received some head coaching interviews. And then New York Jets head coach Aaron Glenn is returning. As of now, offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand is returning. And defensive coordinator, they fired him in the middle of the year. I forget his name now. Stan probably remembers. And Chris
Steve Wilkes.
Harris was the interim. So we'll see if Chris Harris returns. But right now, they don't have a permanent defensive coordinator. Stan, what was that defensive coordinator's name?
That was Steve Wilkes, who
That's right.
now I don't think has had more than 1 year with a single team in the NFL for the last, is it 5 or 6 years? It's been quite a bit where he's just bounced around. But if I do want to correct you on one thing, it's not the AFC West. That was the East.
Oh my gosh! Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. It's live TV, folks.
Yeah, but with the AFC East, that head coaching position for the Dolphins, we're gonna talk a little bit more about it. I saw the thing you showed me before we started recording about like how we're looking at these vacancies. I think it's a pretty attractive vacancy, at least by the standards of what the other teams look like. Especially because they have some of the top end talent. They don't have a lot. They're kind of like the Jets when Aaron Glenn came there, right? They have some pieces. They have some great chess pieces all across that team, but there's so many rooms that just have no one, or there's just underdeveloped players. So I think it's an interesting head coaching position. If they get a coach who's able to really develop players, who can find the way to use his chess pieces, I think they can really turn it around quite quickly because of who they have. In terms of the Jets, that you seem a little unsure about Glenn and Engstrand there. I'll tell you my take real quick. I think that DC situation going into the season, it was very unclear what that would look like. I think Aaron Glenn should call plays simply because we've seen him do it, and we've seen him do it with really, I don't want to say poor talent, but mixed talent, especially with the Lions. The end of last season, just think about how many practice squad guys he had to start with all the injuries they had, right? He knows how to use his pieces on defense. I'd love to see him call plays again. Unfortunately, I don't think he will, because when you look at the coaches from his coaching tree, especially with Campbell, who he was with most recently, there were definitely some big issues there. But yeah, like I'm looking at the situation with him, and there's a lot of questions.
All right. Yeah, I just, the Jets offense was struggling last year, and that can be put on Fields, that can be put on whoever. So I personally be a little surprised with all the names that are out there that they wouldn't, maybe try to bring in a more experienced guy. Maybe they really like Tanner, though. Maybe they've got some promise. We'll see. We'll go over my reasons for the Dolphins not being a great team or where they are in terms of head coaching spot later. But yeah. AFC West. This is actually the AFC West this time. Okay. We have Andy Reid, who is the head coach. He's obviously returning. Offensive coordinator Matt Nagy and defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo are both receiving head coaching interviews. Steve Spagnuolo has received some the last few years, so that is not shocking. We'll see if he actually takes one. Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton is returning. They're the number 1 seed in the AFC West. Offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi is returning. Defensive coordinator Van Joseph is, like I said, probably going to be one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the NFL next season, if not a head coach. He's very highly respected. I know that he's been looked at by pretty much every team that has a head coach opening, including the Arizona Cardinals, which I think is of note because he has a connection there. The Los Angeles Chargers, Jim Harbaugh head coach, is returning. Offensive coordinator Greg Roman was fired yesterday, so they have an opening there. Defensive coordinator Jesse Minter is back as of now, but he is being looked at for head coaching roles. Las Vegas Raiders head coach Pete Carroll was fired. They moved on from their offensive coordinator in season. Chip Kelly, he was gone. And so the only standing coach in Vegas is defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. So, Stan, is there any names here that stick out to you?
Just the Chargers in general. I just think they've been so close for so many years. I think they even though Harbaugh, yeah, he's new there. We've seen a lot of teams move on from coaches quicker than usual in the last couple of years. And if that offense can't turn around, because that's why they brought Harbaugh in, to find ways to get wins for Herbert, right? They knew what they had with Herbert. They wanted Harbaugh to make everything else work, and he wasn't able to. So that to me is a big concern with the Chargers. I think this OC position is probably one of the most attractive jobs in the NFL right now in terms of OCs, at least, right? Because you're getting so many tools there. It's just about getting that O-line to look good for a season, right? Can you get them to stay healthy, get the right guys in the building, and make those young guys perform at a good level?
Yeah, and Greg Roman was a Harbaugh guy as well. It was a little bit surprising to see them move on from Greg Roman, and I would look at him as someone for if wherever John goes, what if they need an offensive coordinator? Maybe Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator there. He could get hired as that role under John Harbaugh after getting fired by Jim. But next division, we got the AFC South. So, Colts, Shane Steichen, head coach, returning. They've already confirmed this. Offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter has been there forever. He's safe. Defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo has a few head coaching roles. I know the Giants have looked at him, or head coaching interviews, but I think he's probably going to be coming back to the Colts with as many big names that are out there. Houston Texans, we have D'Amico Ryans, offensive coordinator Nick Caley, and defensive coordinator Matt Burke, all returning. Jacksonville Jaguars, head coach Liam Cohen, offensive coordinator Grant Udinsky, and defensive coordinator Anthony Caponilli, who I saw, actually, I forget what team, but there is a team that requested a head coaching interview with him today. So he is getting some looks. And that Jaguars defense was very good this year, almost to a point that it was underappreciated. So not shocked there. And then the Titans head coach, that opening is there. Offensive coordinator Nick Holes is still on the website. Defensive coordinator Denard Wilson is still on the website. But of course, with all these head coaching roles, someone could come in and just fire everyone if they wanted to. If so, no one's really safe once the head coach gets cut off, So, Stan, were there any names there that surprised you, shocked you?
Not really. I think a lot of that made sense. The Titans in general are just such a confusing team. But I'm very interested in that spot specifically because for any of, like we've seen in the last couple of years, so many teams find quick success when they have that quarterback, even if there's questions about that quarterback, when they have that quarterback and get an offensive mind in the system. So to me, that I think could be a place where maybe Harbaugh might like enough with Cam Ward. Now it looks like Harbaugh likes a lot more with Jackson Dart, but maybe the Giants situation doesn't work out. Could the Titans be a good place for him? Now the thing with the Titans is, unlike the Chargers, who just have like those unique specific things they have to work on, the Titans have just about everything to work on. So very different situation. On the bright side, though, that means you can bring in all your own guys, right? You can change that roster. You can flip it in an offseason or two a lot quicker than a team like the Falcons, for example.
Yeah, no, and the Titans have been named as a, sneaky team that John Harbaugh might want to go to because they have a lot of cap space. They obviously have their quarterback. So you can do pretty much anything. It's that clay ball we talked about with the Raiders and Brian Flores last week or on Saturday when we did this live stream. Okay, over to the NFC. This recap is taking longer than I thought it would, but we're okay. Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell is returning, to the dismay of some Vikings fans in the comment section. Offensive coordinator Wes Phillips is back. Defensive coordinator Brian Flores is one of the top names in head coaching this year. We'll see if he gets a job. I think the Steelers would be really good for him now. Steelers or Raiders. Chicago Bears head coach Ben Johnson returning. Offensive coordinator Declan Doyle returning. Defensive coordinator Dennis Allen very likely returning. Detroit Lions MCDC Dan Campbell returning. Offensive coordinator open. Defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard returning. And then Green Bay Packers thought he might be on the hot seat. Looks like he's safe now. Head coach Matt LaFleur. Offensive coordinator Adam Stenovich, and then defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, who is receiving some head coaching interviews, are all returning as of now. But yeah, like I said, Hafley's got those head coaching interviews, so we'll see what happens with that. Stan, anything here?
Yeah, I think the Lions are just an example of a team that's been very obviously changed by moving on from both their DC and their OC. And Kelvin Shepard, I can't say he performed tremendously well. I'm not entirely sure he was the biggest issue. Actually, I don't think he was the biggest issue there, but there's just the Lions have a lot of work that has to be done, especially in that division. But yeah, no surprise the rest of those teams are going to keep their staffs really, unless someone goes for a better job. Just because they've had so much success, they have so many of the pieces. Definitely the toughest division in football. That and then the NFC West.
We haven't gotten a chance to ask Dion yet, but what would your thoughts be about Mike McDaniel being the offensive coordinator in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him work as an OC before. We've seen him be fantastic, even as a head coach. Like that offense was always doing creative things and finding ways to get the ball down the field. And when you want to talk about the Lions, creativity is the first thing that comes to mind. Look at that offense, both this year, last year, with Ben Johnson. We saw them just be creative and aggressive, find interesting ways to trick defenses out there. So I think systematically it may not be the best fit, but in terms of the mentality, the approach to moving a football down the field, I think that would work well. And as far as the system is concerned, every OC is going to have a slightly different system, so that they would have to make some pretty big personnel changes, I think, to be able to get McDaniels there. But I think that would be a great fit. Yeah.
See, I think they could do it with the personnel that they have there. That's what I'm looking at. That's what almost makes me nervous is, seeing Jahmyr Gibbs in an explosive Shanahan style offense with Jamison Williams, as kind of that speedy deep receiver, almost that Tyreek Hill role, if you want to go analogously. And then you add Amon-Ra St. Brown to that mix and Sam Laporta. I think it could be a very creative, very fast-paced offense, like what we have seen in Miami. And I think we would all say Jared Goff is a better quarterback than what Tua is, so it would be elevated even further. But do you want to?
I think there's definitely a few skill sets that they'd have to bring in. I think specifically for McDaniels, you need your tight ends and receivers overall to be able to block a little better. Just in terms of that team there. And we saw that as a problem for the Dolphins at times. They just didn't have the right personnel with McDaniels. I don't know if it's 2 years ago or now the seasons are kind of mixing up. I want to say it was 2 years ago where we saw the Dolphins, just their wide receivers, be unable to make that offense work at times. So I think there still are personnel differences that would have to be made. But yeah, I do agree. The running back room right there would be tremendous to have McDaniels run that, to have those guys running trick plays like every second moment of the game. One interesting thing I will say is I think that the reason that Dolphins offense looked the way it did was because Tua couldn't do a lot of the things McDaniels may have wanted him to do. And I think, for example, a lot of the motion plays, I don't know if McDaniels would want to use it as much as he used it in the Dolphins, because now you have a quarterback who could dissect defenses a little bit better. So it would, as you pointed out, it would be a very supercharged offense. I think very high octane offense from day one.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see what happens in Detroit. Let's go to the NFC East. Dallas Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer is returning. Offensive coordinator Clayton Adams is returning. They fired Matt Eberflus a few days ago, so their defensive coordinator position is open. New York Giants fired their head coach. However, offensive coordinator Tim Kelly and defensive coordinator Charlie Bolin are still listed. Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn is returning. Offensive coordinator, they just hired him on Friday, David Blow, and then they don't have a defensive coordinator either. David is replacing Cliff Kingsbury and will very likely be the second longest tenured offensive coordinator in the NFC East when all of this is said and done, because the Philadelphia Eagles fired their offensive coordinator, although he may return in a different role with the team. But head coach Nick Sirianni and defensive coordinator Vic Fangio are returning. But yeah, lots of changes happening in the NFC East here. So nothing really shocked me here. I think the most shocking was probably Cliff Kingsbury getting fired for me. But he's already been replaced. So Stan, is anything really shock you here?
Not necessarily. I do expect the rest of the Giants staff to be cleared out pretty soon into getting a new head coach in there. Um, but yeah, no big shocks, I suppose. I mean, in many ways, like every one of these teams, according to their own fans, hugely underperformed. And for the Commanders and Giants, the evidence for that is pretty obvious. But for the Cowboys, think about how we view the Cowboys going into the season. And I think Schottenheimer showed his ability as a head coach at times, but he's nowhere near a good head coach at this point in time. So it'll be interesting to see what his leash looks like next year. And then talking about the Eagles, yeah, it's very obvious. Going from the Super Bowl to not the Super Bowl is going to be a negative season altogether, right? But going from the Super Bowl to only having one game in the playoffs, that's an even bigger drop off.
Yeah, and losing it to the most injured team in the NFL, who lost another key player during that game, and you still lost. That's not a great look. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens in the NFC East. NFC West, pretty much everyone is returning. Obviously, these are all playoff teams. A lot of these guys are being looked at for head coaching roles. Clint Kubiak, Clay Kubiak, I don't think is being looked at with the Niners. They're brothers, by the way. And defensive coordinator Robert Saleh is being looked at for a head coaching role for the Niners. The only position that is currently open in this division is the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, which, of course, could open up that offensive coordinator Drew Petzing role and defensive coordinator Nick Rallis role for the Cardinals. I know that Cardinals fans are not the largest fans of Drew Petzing, so I'm sure there are some that are rooting for him to kind of move on, either by choice or by the next head coach kind of telling him to move on. But not really a lot to discuss here, I think. Stan?
Yeah, I mean, Nick Rallis, I think, could stay around, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I would expect the Cardinals to move on from everyone coaching wise, but we'd probably look at a completely different staff next year. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about this division.
There's some big family names in this division. You got the LaFleurs, the Shulas, the Kubiaks, the Shanahans. Lots of NFL legacy in this division.
That's true.
Final division, I think. We already went over the NFC North, right? Yes. Okay, so NFC South. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Head coach Todd Bowles is also the defensive coordinator, so he did not fire himself from that position yet. Offense, they don't have an offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay. Todd Monken, I saw, was looking at that. Carolina Panthers, head coach Dave Canales returning. Offensive coordinator Brad Idzik is returning. Defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero has been getting some head coaching looks, but he will likely be returning. I don't think he's a huge name in these this cycle. Then New Orleans Saints, everyone's returning. Head coach Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier, defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, and then the Atlanta Falcons, your head coach has been fired. Offensive coordinator Zach Robinson is still there, and then a name that will be familiar to Stan, defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich is returning. So, Stan, I know you had some thoughts throughout the season on Todd Bowles. Is there any other thoughts here on Todd Bowles or any of these other coaches?
I mean, to put it simply with Todd Bowles, he has not improved. He's the same coach in many ways as we saw in the Jets. And I think the Bucs should move on from him. I also think if the Bucs had an open spot, I think they could be probably the number one opportunity for any head coach candidate. Like Harbaugh can go to the Bucs and see himself as having an easy shoe into the playoffs next year. Right. And one of your division opponents, the Falcons, fired their head coach. They're probably going to a rebuild. And they have probably the worst draft pick / financial situation in the NFL right now. So they're not going to look great. The Saints have a lot of issues right there. They're not going to look great. The Panthers looked better than usual and still had a losing record. So I think for any head coach, that would have been the place to go in the NFL. But they decided to keep him for some reason. And I know from my friends who've been here longer and have watched this team many more years than I have, it's kind of just the way that franchise operates. They like to keep things kind of slow in house. And it's like another example of this is they don't really trade for a lot of guys. They don't bring in a lot of big free agents. Most of their starters were drafted by them. I think it was like all but 2 or 3 of them going into this season were drafted by the Bucks. So they're an organization that likes to keep things smooth. And I think this was a year they should have, tried to shake things up, because in 1 or 2 years, when you're looking again next for a head coach, if you have to fire Todd Bowles, if he's not able to bring any results by then, what's going to happen? You're not going to have the same team, right? You may not be able to compete and be the number one option for a head coach. It's very rare that a team would have that sort of roster. Like them and the Ravens are the 2 teams right now, unless I'm missing someone, who have what you think could be a roster that could just like slide into the playoffs. But yeah, I just don't understand keeping Todd Bowles. On the Falcons side, I don't understand getting rid of Morris. I thought he overperformed, and I think as a head coach, he's done the job of head coach well. And like I'm looking at Aaron Glenn. I don't know what to think of Aaron Glenn. I don't think he's done a good or bad job as a head coach. And the fact that they basically tanked the last third of the season makes that much harder to understand. But like Raheem Morris, you look at the actual coaching he had to do. You look at the decisions, not personnel decisions, but like who he's playing. Oh, sorry, not personnel in terms of bringing players in, but in terms of which players are getting the opportunities, right? He makes great decisions there. So I definitely disagree with this moving on from Raheem Morris, what seems like so soon, and maybe you have different thoughts on that.
I was a little surprised Raheem Morris got moved on from so quickly. I mean, they did struggle, but I thought he was kind of put into a bad situation. I mean, their GM, whose name is Fontensort or whatever his name was, kind of, and maybe Morris had a part of this, I don't know, but to sign Kirk Cousins to the contract that they did, and then draft a quarterback with the 8th overall pick, who wasn't the most like proven quarterback. He was injury prone. And you say like, yeah, we're going to bench him. But then you start him and you're like, shoot, this guy isn't good. They gave him a few games. Then he got hurt. And it was just like this whole thing. And Kirk Cousins ended up it was just a mess. And it was a mess that was created. And I don't know how much say Raheem Morris had in all of that. But it was just like he was given these 2 guys with like one arm tied behind his back and said, go make an NFL team. And I don't know. It was a fair situation.
At least by the reports I've seen, I think he had a similar situation to Rob Saleh with the Jets, where he was able to get whatever he wanted done on the defensive side, but on offense, he was kind of letting the GM run the system for him. And obviously they didn't make many good decisions, right? They have one of the worst situations in the league in terms of what they have moving forward. And that's another reason why I don't understand moving on from him. I would much rather, if I was, owning the Falcons, have just said, hey, no more big trades. Just take the picks you have, try to get me a winning season or 2, and then fire him in a year or 2 when you have better tools for your next coach. They don't have a pick till number 40 or something this year? Like, they don't have a great draft situation. What new coach is going to come into a team that has terrible cap space, terrible ability with the draft, not a whole lot going on in terms of the roster itself, especially on offense? What coach is going to look at that and say, I'm going to go and coach this team, the Falcons, and build them up?
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to look to see if I can find their first pick, but I can't. But yeah, the Falcons, I think, handicapped themselves. I think you either had to say, and hindsight's 2020, but I think we were saying this back then too. It looks like their first pick is pick 48, by the way. But I don't understand the signing Kirk Cousins to that major deal and then drafting a young quarterback like 8th overall. Now, if Caleb Williams had slid or Jaden Daniels or something, and it was just like, you obviously have to take that type thing, I get that. But Michael Penix was a bit of a reach. And it was so much of a reach that it kind of created this, I don't know if you remember, like all those quarterbacks just got taken like right after that because teams started freaking out. There was this run on quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy ended up going in the first round. Bo Nix ended up going in the first round, even though he was graded as like a second-round pick. So there was a lot that happened there. Stan, do you think Todd Bowles, just real quickly, would benefit from having his own defensive coordinator instead of him doing the job?
Maybe. I mean, I think the issue is more so that his inability to make decisions on the offensive side of the ball and to kind of have a vision there, especially for a team that just moved around. They've had what, 3 or 4 OCs in the last like 5 years or something. There's no consistency on the offensive side, and because Bowles doesn't have enough of a grasp, or maybe sorry, that sounds insulting. I mean, like, he doesn't have the ability to maneuver, on the offensive side in terms of personnel and decision making. When he just gives the reins to an OC every single season and just can't get a guy to stay there, it's tough. Like, I don't see what the right decision is there for him. I don't see how he can build that better unless he has more of his own vision lined out for that offense. But I think right now they kind of lack a consistent vision.
All right. I do think it's interesting. Two of his OCs that I can think of off the top of my head, though, have been hired as head coaches: Liam Cohen and Dave Canales.
And done well.
Yeah. Notable coaching names, just to give us a final sort of recap. Mike Tomlin, former Steelers head coach, not expected to coach this season. Just as a reminder, a team would have to trade for him because he resigned. His contract goes through 2027. John Harbaugh, like I said, is interviewing with the Giants today. Former Ravens head coach Kevin Stefanski, former Browns head coach Brian Flores, Vikings defensive coordinator. That Steelers spot is looking nice for him. Vance Joseph, Broncos defensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak, Steelers. He is the offensive coordinator. That says defensive coordinator. That is a typo. Mike McDaniel, former Dolphins head coach. Jeff Hafley, Packers defensive coordinator. Jesse Minter, the Chargers defensive coordinator. Raheem Morris, the former Falcons head coach. Matt Nagy, Chiefs OC. We got Spags, the Chiefs DC. And then Todd Monken, the Ravens OC. Stan, real quick, any big names here other than the top 4 that kind of stick out to you that could sneak in as a, possible head coach candidate?
Not really out of the top 4. The thing is, with how many teams are looking for coaches now, obviously a lot of these guys will, right? And I think Matt Nagy, I think it's basically done with him career. Like, I don't expect him to get that sort of position, but like maybe a Minter can get one of those positions. I don't know. It's all of these guys just do have a lot of big holes in sort of in their resume. Big mistakes made in the past, but I think a team like the Raiders, if they're getting desperate and they see Matt Nagy, who had experience as a head coach before, I could see a team like them just biting on him.
We do have a comment. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Just going to leave that where that's at. But I'll show you after the show, Stan.
Okay.
But we're just going to ignore that for now. So thanks for being a fan of the show, though, dude. Anyway, yeah, I think that, I think Jeff Hafley could be a sneaky one. Clint Kubiak, I really like. I think he could be an offensive coordinator. A head coach, excuse me. Vance Joseph could be one. Brian Flores, I think, should definitely get a head coaching this cycle with all the openings that there are. Again, that Steelers role just kind of screams Brian Flores. Next up, though, I want to look at, this is my rankings. This is Josh Butts' rankings of the top head coaching spots. And I'm going to go over my reasoning for each one, and Stan, you can tell me if you agree or disagree. Ravens, I have them as the number 1 spot. They have Lamar. They already have some defensive stars, and then they've got $21 million in cap space. And these are the cap space allocations are according to over the cap. There are some different numbers other places. Then the New York Giants, they have Dart, they have Neighbors, they got some defensive stars. They only have $5 million in cap space, though, so that's problematic. But maybe you can, work some cap space magic. Steelers, they don't have a quarterback. They do have some young defensive stars, and they do have $30 million in cap space. Then the Browns, lots of young stars on both sides. You have Myles Garrett. You have $15 million in cap space. Um, they might have a quarterback. I think jury should still be out on Shador. But again, the NFL gives up on young guys very quickly. We talked about that with Dante Moore. The Titans, Cam Ward, and $96 million in cap space. So you have your first overall pick quarterback and a ton of money to kind of build around. You could also trade Jeffrey Simmons if you wanted to and maybe get some more draft capital. The Raiders have really no quarterback. They have Brock Bowers, Ashton Gianti, and maybe like Max Crosby and $89 million in cap space. But they're also in one of the harder divisions in the NFL. Cardinals, you have no idea what's going to happen with Kyler Murray. You have $27 million in cap space. I don't really think they have a culture as a team. They do have some potential stars, though, with like Michael Wilson, and then you've got not Greg Dortch. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr., but you do have Trey McBride. You've got some guys there. They do have some things you can work with. Falcons, like we talked about, their quarterback situation is a mess. You have some defense with like Jesse Bates, and James Pierce looked really good as a rookie this year. And then you have Bijan and maybe Drake London, $22 million in cap space. The Dolphins, in my opinion, are the worst spot because you don't know what's going to happen with Tua. You don't know what's going to happen with Tyreek. If you cut Tua, it's $100 million in dead cap, and they are currently negative $24 million in terms of cap. So you would have no money to spend. You'd kind of be stuck with what you have, and what you have isn't necessarily great. Stan, what are your thoughts?
Number one, I would definitely move the Titans up a little bit. I would put the Falcons below the Dolphins because I think the Falcons just don't have. Not having a top draft pick in your first year as a head coach, that makes it much tougher. Because once you get past the first round, like the returns are getting so much worse as you go down. Like even at pick 48, it's hard to find a starter at pick 48. But like any first round pick, you can find a starter easily. So like that inability to build that way, as well as a financial inflexibility, that to me is a big issue. But that being said, as you said, the Dolphins, there's a lot of issues there as well. The Titans, though, the reason I'm moving them up is because, as we just talked about, you can do whatever you want with that franchise. Like there's so much flexibility, and if someone like Harbaugh goes there, right, one of those coaches who has a name already, he will be able to do whatever he wants. No questions asked. Harbaugh wants to bring in this specific player or overpay for this tight end, they will let him because he's Harbaugh. I don't think you'll get that with most of these other teams. So for like a head coach who's looking for where he can make that quick impact, I think that ability with the Titans would be there. Plus with the Titans, the expectations are like the media is not really there. There's not crazy high expectations. You have Cam Ward, who I think has shown the skills more so than he's shown the ability to put them together, but he has the raw skills for sure. And then I'm not really moving any of those top three teams around too much. I might move the Giants below the Steelers just because of the Steelers. At least you're looking at a team that's made the playoff every year for the last however many years. Was it 7 or 8 now? So that to me, or had winning seasons, that to me is a big difference maker. The fact that you're going to a team that doesn't also fire the head coaches very often, right? It took forever for them to fire Tomlin. I know many Steelers fans have been pushing that for years now. That to me is something that moves it up as a head coaching spot because one, for a fan, your head coach is not going to be scared of losing their job and therefore not going to make really risky decisions of putting in a young quarterback into early or trading for a player who may not really be worth it. We've seen teams with coaches who are scared of that make those rash decisions, kind of like the Jets last year. So that to me moves the Steelers up a little bit as well.
Yeah, I can see arguments for moving these guys around a little bit. I think the Titans for me is going to depend a lot on what the draft picks look like for them this year. And obviously whoever the head coach is this year is going to have some input to that. But the Browns, you've got Mason Graham, Carson Schwessinger, even just looking at this last draft class, they have a ton of young stars. Quinshawn Judkins, Dylan Sampson, Harold Fannin Jr. It just goes on and on and on. And I think that they have a ton of potential there. There hasn't been anyone who has been able to come in and kind of unlock that fully. They've never been able to, nail down that number one, spot, which is the quarterback position. Ownership kind of, again, handicapped them with Deshaun Watson. That kind of set Kevin Stefanski back a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see that quarterback position get nailed down. And that's really what's holding a lot of these teams back, it seems, from really contending. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but it'll be interesting to see what happens and who goes where. And with the Steelers getting potentially Brian Flores, a defensive-minded coach, what happens with the quarterback position there? Do they go with Mason Rudolph? This isn't really a great quarterback class. Do they maybe sign another veteran? We'll see what happens. We've got about 10 minutes. We can go a little bit over if we need to. No one's stopping us. But Stan, we have the divisional round this weekend. Lots of good NFL football to be played. Lots of exciting games coming up. I don't know if you want to talk about all of them. We can if you want. But what game sticks out to you the most this week?
Definitely the Bears game. One, because we've seen the Bears pull themselves back multiple times against, teams that, they're going to play better in the first 2.5 to 3 quarters, but the Bears can do enough in that fourth quarter once Caleb Williams is kind of in his zone. I don't think that's going to be an option against the Rams. So I think this will be a very telling game for Caleb Williams. Like, can he get past this hump and do enough in the first 2 quarters? And then for the Rams, they're not looking the greatest. What do they have? Like 3 wins in the last 5 weeks or something? Something like that. They had some disappointing losses. They almost lost the last game to the Panthers. That would have been easily the biggest, difference between 2 teams in any of the wild card games. So, I'm looking at the Rams. I think they're a weaker team. The Bears, on the other hand, they're this up-and-coming team, but they just can't get past the hump of slow starts. So that, to me, makes it a very interesting and a very good matchup. Also, with Stafford, the last couple of weeks, you've seen him get better towards the end of games. So I think it could be a slow start followed by 2 quarterbacks and offenses really getting the ball out in the last 10 minutes. And who doesn't like a game like that? A lot of excitement back and forth. It could be a very good game to me.
Yeah, and I mean, either way, whoever wins this game, Rams have had a great season. The Bears are playing with house money. Whatever amount of success they reach at this point is better than what anyone thought. Ben Johnson has turned this team around in season 1. We have seen Caleb Williams make massive jumps. Stan is leaving me. Oh my gosh, he's leaving me. That's okay. I'll be back. But I'm talking to you now, I guess, the audience. Caleb Williams has seen massive jumps. We've seen, Roma Dunze make some moves. He was kind of quiet in the last playoff game, but he had some big plays. Colson Loveland, rookie, great season. So what Ben Johnson has done in season 1 has been phenomenal, and Bears fans should be very excited. And I think they are very excited. The Rams, like Stan was alluding to, have that potential to either go, Super Bowl, or they could lose. I did say that they would probably struggle against the Panthers because Stafford has tended to struggle against single high defenses for some reason this year, specifically against the Panthers. He struggled when they threw that at him. But we'll see what Stafford is able to do against the Chicago Bears. I'm sure they're going to be bringing a lot of pressure. Dennis Allen likes to do that. But Stafford isn't someone, Jordan Love is younger. Maybe that pressure impacts him a little bit more than it does Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's less mobile, though, so that's kind of 2 sides of that coin. Stan's not here, so I can talk about whatever I want. Let's talk about the Bills. In my opinion, the most important player in all of the playoffs that is remaining in the playoffs is Josh Allen. There is not a single player who is more important to their team's success this season than this man right here. He has to put the team on his back. his wide receivers are not like his wide receiver one is Khalil Shakir. His tight ends are an aging Dawson Knox and, injury prone, beat up Dalton Kincaid. The defense has some guys, but they're also pretty injured. This is the most important player in the playoffs. And what Josh Allen does is going to matter. So, they're playing the Broncos. Broncos have a fantastic defense. Patrick Surtain is likely going to take Khalil Shakir out of this game. I do not expect Khalil Shakir to be a key in this game. So that even puts more of this on Josh Allen. What can he do in the running game? What can he do with these other lesser known receivers? Can Keon Coleman, kind of step up and be a big part of this game? James Cook is going to have to be a big part of this game. I think this Broncos team is overrated personally. I know they're the first seed. I know how many wins they have. I don't care. I think that they are an overrated team and that the Bills should be able to beat them, but it is going to be on Josh Allen's back. Stan, you have returned. Nice of you to join us again. What do you do? You have any thoughts on Broncos Bills?
Yeah, the one big thing is that to me, this sort of game, a lot of it's going to come down to the stadium, and the Broncos are at home. Bo Nix, if he could get settled in the game early, that to me would be the key for the Broncos having any shot of success. But Josh Allen, at the same time, he also has shown at times he needs a couple of quarters to settle in, which wasn't as much of a thing these last 4 or 5 years when he's looking like a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And now we're seeing him kind of slow down and take that time to warm up into the game. And it's kind of, as we're talking about this, looking around at all these teams, about half of them kind of, you could say that about them. They need that time to get into the game. So to me, I expect Josh Allen to win. Obviously, he's a divisional opponent, so I'm not the biggest fan of him. I'm also not the biggest fan of Sean Payton, so I'm kind of split between who I want to lose more, rather. But when I'm looking at these two teams, I think if Bo Nix can get just get 20 points in the first half, that sort of performance, I don't think the Bills will be able to come back from. But we've also seen the Bills come back from the Patriots game a few weeks ago, where I think they were down maybe about 20 as well. So I don't really know what the Broncos' path to victory needs to look like outside of Bo Nix has to get some touchdowns up early.
All right, let's crash through these final 2 games here real quick. Okay, so we've got 49ers and Seahawks. Divisional matchup in the divisional round. 49ers, it kind of just feels like these are the only 2 players they have left. Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy. Everyone else is hurt, it feels like. And the Seahawks have been really good. And we just saw these 2 teams play in primetime, and the Seahawks kind of dominated. I personally fully expect the Seahawks to win this game, especially with George Kittle going down. Christian McCaffrey may still have a big game, but the Seahawks are going to be able to dedicate more resources to stopping Christian McCaffrey because you don't have George Kittle. Ricky Pearsall might not play. We don't know yet. They don't have Brandon Ayuk anymore. There's not a lot. They're running out of weapons, and even Kyle Shanahan is running out of things to do on offense because he's even running out of options. But Stan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the 49ers have made so much work, and I think it's been a truly amazing coaching masterpiece from them this season. And when I'm looking at these last couple years for the 49ers, you almost look at those rosters and think those rosters were so much better. Why didn't they look this good? But I think the 49ers are just in this moment right now where everything is clicking. They're getting into these games looking like a top team. It is a home game for them as well, which I know that stadium doesn't have as much of that home game advantage as others. But with the Seahawks, sorry. I mixed it up.
Seahawks are the first overall.
Yeah,
you're going to Seattle.
So that to me is
Big 12
a game changer right there. I think Seattle at home will have it pretty easy. It's not going to be like the Broncos versus Bills where it makes it more even. I think here, Seahawks at home against the 49ers, I expect the Seahawks to win pretty handily there.
That's what I expect too. I think the injuries are going to become insurmountable. The Seahawks are clicking. They're rested. That offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak has them moving. They've got a good team.
Now the 49ers did perform in on the road against the Eagles, which is another one of those, like, probably the top 5 toughest fan bases to play in front of. So that kind of gives you a little bit of hope there. But yeah, the Seahawks, especially with what that offense looks like, I think they could get away early in the game, and I think we could be looking at a 2-score game when all is said and done here.
Okay, yeah. So there you have it. Final game: Texans at Patriots. Texans beat the Steelers. And, this guy had a rough game. CJ Stroud had struggled. He had a few turnovers, had a few that he dropped that didn't end up being lost, but just kind of struggled on offense. This was definitely a defensive game for the Steelers and the Texans. And I don't think the Texans are going to be able to afford to do that against the Patriots. The Patriots are, again, another team that had a really easy schedule, but also their offense has been clicking, and you can't rely on your defense to put up points if you're the Houston Texans. That defense is fantastic, though. So we could see it kind of, we could learn a lot about Drake May in this game, but I think that the Patriots offense is better than the Texans offense. And I think that the gap between those two offenses is bigger than what the gap between the Texans defense and the Patriots defense is, if that makes sense. I think the Patriots are the better overall team, looking at what we've seen from both of these teams recently. But, they didn't put up a ton of points on the Chargers either. So, maybe Drake May does struggle in his first kind of playoff run. We'll see. Stan, do you?
I disagree with you there. I think the difference between the Patriots defense and the Texans defense is much bigger. I think the Texans are just so much more dominant, and their ability to get after the get into the pocket, that to me is where I expect Drake May to make decisions. I don't think there's a quarterback this year who has had more passes that should have been intercepted but weren't than Drake May. He's been very lucky. And against this Texans team that's going to get pressure against you the entire game, you will not have a moment to breathe. You will not have a moment to rest against that D-line. I expect that to push Drake May and the Patriots much further. And against the Chargers, a team that, we all knew the Chargers were going to lose, right? Maybe not as much of a difference between the Rams and Panthers, but we all know going into that game that the Chargers were going to lose. The Texans are not like that. Yes, they have those struggles on offense, but just because of how dominant that defense is, it's similar to the Broncos, where in any given game, no matter what happens on the offensive side of the ball, that defense is going to keep them in it, or at least give them a very, very good chance. If Stroud can avoid the turnovers, I think they win. If Stroud gives the turnovers, I think that's game right there. Like if he has, what did he have, 3 turnovers?
Right? Something like that. It was the ball just kept slipping out of his hands at the snap. It was weird.
Yeah, he doesn't get away with that a second time. That's like for sure that's not going to happen, right? And the Patriots, if you give them the ball at the 35, like happened in one of those turnovers against the Steelers, they're not going for 3. They're getting 7. So that to me is going to be the big difference maker. Can Stroud do enough? And that run game for the Texans, on the other hand, looked maybe the best it's looked this season. I don't know. Like, am I bugging there?
No, it looked really good. And Woody Marks even went out for a little bit, and he still looked good. I think Woody Marks has RB1 potential. He's a 4th-round rookie, I think, and he has looked great this season.
I mean, he proved a few nights back that he has that RB1 potential, and he is RB1 for them, right? He's doing it. We were watching him do it in 4K. So it's just like we're seeing this happen in front of us. The Texans, they have the tools on offense. It's just CJ Stroud. Is he going to be able to stay consistent enough and calm enough in another one of those big playoff, stadiums? You're playing in Foxborough. It gets tough there. Will he be able to be stable enough of a quarterback, make consistent decisions, make the correct decisions enough of the time that put his offense in the right position?
And CJ Stroud can be that guy as well. We've seen him be that guy as well. It's just
and even against the Steelers, though, despite his mistakes, we saw him have some amazing throws there. We saw him hit a couple of dimes out there. So it works at times, and at other times it's just he's making big mistakes. So it depends on which version of him you get.
I will be interested to see if Nico Collins plays. I think that will be a big, um, kind of. He's in concussion protocol. Does he play against the Patriots? He could, but we got to see if he gets through that process. He did not practice today. I just looked that up, but that would be a huge miss if Nico Collins isn't there for the Houston Texans. Um, but that's all I've got to say. We went a little bit over, but not too bad over. Stan, do you have anything else you want to add before we roll the credits?
No, I'm excited to watch these games. I hope the Texans win and get the Patriots out of there.
Yeah, I hope. I would like to see both the Patriots and the Broncos get bounced personally.
Yeah, the AFC is so much obviously weaker than the NFC this year. And like we've seen it before where like the AFC will have that one team, whether it's the Mahomes Chiefs or before that, the Brady Patriots, or before that, the Mark Sanchez Jets, who are gonna go mile there. But you just don't have that this year. There's so many question marks, which is exciting, but also kind of depressing when you're looking at the NFC, where it's like the Titans are going up, like not the Titans, like these big teams with very defined identities going up against each other.
Yeah, I mean the AFC has really one team I'm rooting for. That's the Bills. I wouldn't be mad about the Texans, but the NFC, I'm like any of these teams can win. I don't care. I'd be happy for any of these teams to win a Super Bowl. I mean, the Rams already have one, unfortunately, against the Bengals, but Matthew Stafford suffered for so long. I'd be okay with him getting two. So we'll see what happens here. These playoffs are very interesting. We're going to have a new Super Bowl champion this year as well, now that the Eagles have been bounced. So that's exciting as well. But without further ado, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out more than you know, and it only takes you 5 seconds to do so. Let us know what you think in the comments, and make sure to share this stream with your friends so that they can let us know as well. Until next time, thank you so much for supporting us, and go do something nice for someone.